All right. Now, okay. I guess I don't have the option. Usually when I record, it says, do you want my own to a cloud or whatever? So it said recording in progress. I don't know where it's being recorded, but it's recording in progress. So I'm going to get rolling here. So the description here, as far as with our chat function, I'm going to treat this pretty much like I do my class, which is I'm not going to be attending much to the chat, but please have a conversation there if you find it beneficial along the way. So thanks for joining the discussion here at Model Palooza 21. You know, I'm part of the origin story for Model Palooza. Okay, this was in 2014, and that was already our 10th year. I may have coined the phrase, I'm not exactly sure. I am a little disappointed when I look online, we don't come up first. It's some modeling thing down in Florida. So we need to work on our PR a little bit. Today's talk, and I'm gonna call it plural, because if you give me an hour, I'm gonna give you about 3 talks, okay? So my first one here, I'm gonna discuss a little bit what I've learned from educational research, either in the literature or myself, about transitioning to online teaching. Successes I've had this last year, and also a little bit of information about an online course that's now being offered at OSU. It's called Advanced Chemistry Knowledge for Educators. I'm going to share a little insight. In fact, we've got a couple participants from the very first course joining in today's conversation. So I should probably let them talk instead of me. Now, I want you to think back this last year when we were switching online. What were your initial expectations? Did you think, well, it's going to be pretty much business as usual? Or maybe you were optimistic, you thought it could even be better, or no, there was no chance, it was just going to be a catastrophe. I think I was probably trending somewhat negative. And I mean, you can only answer for yourself. What's been the reality? For me, I've trended positive. I've had a lot more success this year than I would have anticipated. And I want to sort of share some of those insights with y'all. So my path, as I was thinking what I would do this year, well, it began by considering, okay, what do I already know if I have to have an asynchronous component in my course? And then more broadly, how do I think teaching and learning works in my class? What can I continue to do that I found success with? And I guess the uncertainty was, what am I going to have to do differently? So, I mean, I've been teaching general chemistry at OSU for, I don't know, do the math, 15 years, long time. And I sort of welcome the challenge of saying, okay, I'm going to try some new things. Now, first thing I did then was I looked up a little bit and learned a little bit, well, what's the difference between synchronous and asynchronous learning? And so I Googled it. Ohio State gave me this Venn diagram. And so quick sort of alert for you, if you want to participate in today's talk, there are going to be a lot of Venn diagrams. You can turn this into a drinking game if you want, okay? If you want, every time you see a Venn diagram, take a drink, depending what you have next to you, okay? There are going to be a lot of Venn diagrams here. I think that's why I sort of like their website. It made me think that, okay, my traditional course, which is an in-person large lecture course, that's certainly synchronous. But there were other elements in my course, like the online homework, that were already asynchronous. So it made me realize I've been using aspects of asynchronous learning already in my course. And I bet you have too, whether you're teaching in a high school setting, college setting, I bet there are things that you have already that you try to make effective outside of the classroom space. And it made me realize that if I can do a better job with these asynchronous spaces, I am going to retain them if and when we return to normal instruction. So it made me realize these are not just one-time things. If I can make them better, I'm going to retain them. So if I think a little bit more broadly about my own teaching and learning, modeling instruction has been a big part of that. If you look in the literature, you find certainly descriptions for the overall approach of what modeling is about, more specifically for chemistry courses, how modeling and traditional instruction are different, specific lessons and activities, and then also professional development and how that fits with modeling. Kathy and I have contributed a little bit here within that last one, and we definitely feel that modeling instruction is not a fixed set of lessons, right? It's not something to just take and plug in. And so I want you to have that same perspective when I'm sharing ideas today. I think modeling instruction benefits from a larger perspective on how you think teaching and learning occurs. And I think the same thing is going to apply when we're thinking about our asynchronous learning. So when I think about how modeling instruction has informed my own classroom, it's made me more focused on student-centeredness, active engagement, hearing student voices. It's made my in-person class really value the questions that I ask, a developmental storyline. I value conceptual understanding more than I would have, and also particle level representations. Modeling instruction has strongly informed what I do in my class and what I value. I would add to that, now notice Venn diagram, all right? I've added to that aspects of, okay, what do students do? And this whole category here of self-regulated learning, what do students do in my class? It's been built up in different ways. I list here some of my go-to works that have really influenced how I view student learning within my class. One takeaway within this one, if I were to sort of group these together, is I've learned that if someone is receiving information in a passive way, it's not great for retention. It's not great for understanding. Better is if they're doing something active. Even if they're just doodling, even if they're writing in some ways, research finds that that helps retention, it helps comprehension. But a huge gain is if what they're producing is a novel output, if it's constructive in some ways. That is so much better. Now, even better than that would be if it's also interactive, where they can receive feedback. But it's made me realize that within my class, I need to be as much as possible into the zone on the right side. I need the participants to be constructing something novel. This study I find really persuasive. This was one that I've shared with folks in different talks before. Within this study, what they did was they had participants work on particular problems, and they either did the problem, and afterwards they explained what they did, or they concurrently explained what they did as they went along. And what you find is if it's a problem that's quite concrete, where there's a set plan to do it, there is a difference. If you can concurrently explain along the way, you do better. But notice the difference if it's an abstract problem. Blows me away. You know, this completely blows me away. And it's made me realize in some ways when it comes to modeling instruction, I don't want to dismiss modeling instruction, but it might be the case. Is this what modeling instruction does well? Does modeling instruction have concurrent self-explanation where the learner is describing what they're doing along the way? I think it does, and I've really come to value that. Now, in the Zoom world, I haven't done so, but I've been tempted to say, I'm gonna run my class that way. If we're on Zoom anyways, okay, everybody, mute yourself. Talk through your working on here. So I haven't done concurrent self-explanation, but I'm tempted to. Another thing I've learned within this for the self-regulated learning is when I've looked at things on content area reading, how you really need to provide the learner with a purpose. You can't just give them a resource and say, use it. You really need to provide a purpose, whether it's a reading or whatever you're doing. Now, there's aspects of accountability. Did they adhere to that? And I'm going to share some resources I think that can get at that. But it led me to develop or implement what are called chapter reading guides. So if I give someone a reading, I give them a purpose for it. I give them a checklist as they go through this, as if I'm over their shoulder. Okay, I want you to first do this. Now, when you're doing this part, hey, look for this part. Try to do this. So it's me as an expert of trying to give them some prompts to use text in a particular way. That's something I've done for asynchronous learning before. Now, when I say self-regulated learning, self-regulated learning is part of this broader description. It includes aspects of metacognition, motivation, and behavior. This idea of having various learning strategies, that's what I try to communicate to my students, but as part of a broader picture of what they're actually going to be doing. It's sort of this description here that a learner is putting particular actions into play. They're doing certain things. They're going to receive feedback for how well that is doing relative to what their own expectations are. And I want them to have strategies so that they can try something different. They can try a different learning approach if the feedback is not sufficient, if they're not reaching their goals. Now, this whole description right here in my setting, when I teach freshmen in a chemistry class, Sandra McGuire's work on Teach Students How to Learn, this is a great fit. She has great information that gets at student motivation and behavior. And I'm pointing that out because I don't know about student motivation and behavior in a high school setting. So when I share resources here, I'm sharing things that I have found I am able to put as part of a broader self-regulated learning approach. But you're the experts on your own students in a way that I am not. So I'm going to share things that I have found useful, but they're not necessarily, again, something that you could simply plug in. I thought part of my job is I need to inform and persuade students to use the strategies that are most constructive. And I have to recognize that simply telling about the strategies is part of a broader picture with their own motivation and behavior. As I expand the Venn diagram, take another drink. Okay, it's also aspects of how am I setting up my course? Because a lot of times my course structure involves asynchronous components. So how important is the structure for the course? Now, I'm a little disappointed that more people don't have beverages, because trust me, there are a lot of Venn diagrams coming. All right. Venn diagram. How important is the course structure? Here's a study I did before. Okay. I took my general chemistry class that I was teaching, and I also was teaching a course that was quite similar, but it was for chemistry majors, and we included what's called a peer-led team learning component. I joined with that another course that was also chemistry 1210 that was being taught by someone else, a new instructor. These had the same structure. I used exactly the same resources in terms of homework, my class time, practice exams. They were the same in both of my courses, and I handed off the resources to a colleague. So this was part of a study that was quite interesting, because I could look at, I did a pre-test to see how students started out, and we used the same exams. I could do post-test along the way. This allowed me to do different comparisons. It allowed me to compare how important was, let's say, the student's motivation as far as being majors and this PLTL component with my normal class. So I did an analysis. I was looking within this one for how we did on the final exam. I taught both of these courses. Clear difference between the two. Okay, clear difference. So many features in the course were the same. What was different? Two different factors. Well, one, they were majors in the course. That might have been affecting their motivation. Second was I included this peer-led team learning component. I thought that was interesting, but I was also interested in this other comparison. What if I provided my resources to a colleague? This was their first time teaching the course, first time ever teaching general chemistry, first time I think ever teaching at OSU. If I look more closely, very similar students in both courses in terms of descriptions, like how they did on the ACT coming in, with their first generation students, female, etc. Because what I really wanted to find is, how much do I add value by my own expertise for what I do in the classroom? How much do I add value in a sense by bringing in some modeling skills into that space? Here's the result. I was not adding any value. Okay, now you could look at this two ways. Well, first of all, if I add in a description for what my other colleagues were doing, more uncertainty here, because I don't know, I didn't look as closely to see exactly who those students were, and I know they had different structures. But what I find is across the board, I was not outperforming in this. Okay, I was not outperforming, even though I thought I was quite skilled for what was taking place in my own classroom. Now, you could look at this, is the beaker half full or half empty? When I first thought this, I wanted to quantify how much was I adding by being very skilled in my space. And I found I was not adding. So glass half full, glass half empty. Glass half full is, you know what? I can't clone myself. I do have a twin brother, but I can't clone myself, but I can duplicate my course structure. I can hand it off to new instructors, and they can do very well in the course. Now, when I say do very well, I looked also at this was how we do end of semester student evaluations. So in orange, this is that new instructor. If we look at different elements in terms of the student evaluation, This is a successful, I would say, course being taught for the first time. They're doing quite close to the average across the board. My teaching, I'm near the maximum on all of these, okay? And I'm not saying that to say, oh, I'm bragging about my class. I teach a very popular class that students find success in. Part of what I'm saying within this is when I think about where modeling instruction fits, I'm not sure modeling instruction always captures what is going to lead to success on a multiple choice test. You know, I think the conversations we have, what does it mean to be encouraged to think on your own? I don't think our exams always do a great job with that. So I guess in a way, if I'm doing fine there and I feel like I'm doing other added features, I'm not going to change my ways. Now, I do think though that the structure of the course we set up is very important. So I checked with the students, what do you feel are important elements within the structure of your course? Right near the top, working on practice exams. Quite close to that, working on other problems where they can get feedback. My reading guides, the textbook, and then labs way at the end. So it's really made us look more closely at these idea of practice tests. So what we do with our practice tests now, we've made multiple exams that we put within our homework system. We deliver those to the students. An important feature we have is we include sort of this metacognitive one. We allow them to say, I don't know how to answer this yet. And we find that that's an important feature because then they return to the subject in a different way. We pair it with feedback. We pair it with, okay, here's now a path forward. Hattie, a key thing when he's looking at feedback, his point is, only part of the story is the feedback that you are providing. More important is the person at the right time to receive that feedback? And what we find is when it comes to practice exams, close to the exam time, that is the right time for them to receive the feedback. So we try to help the student understand where they are, what our learning objectives are, where they need to be, and how to improve. And we pair that even with now with video, where we'll say, here's our learning objectives. Here are videos that are linked. In a sense, what we've done is we've taken a flipped class and we put that flipped class resources that we can give to all of the instructors, and we make those embedded with our practice test. Because that really seems when the students are most willing, the feedback is most beneficial, okay? And if you look at studies within this one, this is not new, okay? We find in the literature, if you get feedback from practice exams, students score higher on the actual test. You also find within here, as you expect, they score higher on the ones where they see feedback where there's not a lot of transfer, where those same kind of skills that then show up on the actual test, compared to ones where they're where the questions were quite different. One thing that I've looked within my own, so I had a couple exams that semester. So here was one where I just looked at my own data, where I had a practice test score and then how they did on the subsequent exam. Now, this one-to-one line, I don't put a lot of faith in because I ask different questions, okay? I'm not gonna say 50% means 50%, but I was really interested in this student right here. What did it mean to have a student score like 90% on this practice test and then subsequently underperform on the real test? So I had to reach out to that student. I'm like, okay, tell me about what your strategy was. What were you doing? Fascinating. She says, okay, you know, I ended up taking that practice exam twice. This was a non-traditional student. I ended up taking it twice. And when I took it the second time, I was really trying to memorize the questions. I was trying to get the ones right and really understand those particular topics. And as you might imagine, they said, that didn't serve me that well because you didn't ask those questions on the real test. It was, I wish I videotaped it because she was all about, okay, I am not producing anything novel here. I know that I have a preliminary understanding. I hope that will carry over, but it doesn't in our classes, right? I mean, it was really fascinating just to hear her voice, something of, it wasn't novel. It was reproducing, but it wasn't novel. So when I think about this one, as far as what I've learned, these were all sort of preliminary views of, I had a lot of insight into what I wanted to continue to do online. This idea of new resources though, What did I need to do differently? I wanted to bring insights from my modeling class that I could use asynchronously. Venn diagram, in fact, look at this. This is a 4-part Venn diagram. So within here, I wanted to say that it was going to include online homework. I want to have a metacognitive component. It was certainly going to have an in-class, so I teach synchronous Zoom classes. And the key one that I added here was using the program perusal. That's a new resource that I'm going to talk to you about. Okay. When it comes to online and metacognitive, they were coming at the content in different ways. I do a lot of now metacognitive polls that I include in my class. Are you confident you can do this? How do you feel about this? So I do a lot of metacognitive prompts and polling now. Both my online homework system and perusal are graded, but the perusal and the in-class, they both have a social component. My social component for the in-class one, it's the chat, the dialogue that takes place there and how students help each other and have conversations around the material. Perusal is all about that feature. So within perusal within here, I've used this in different ways. When I say I'm confident that things are going well this year, it's almost entirely due to perusal. This is the best resource I know for it supporting asynchronous engagement and learning. You can use it in different ways. I've used it with textbooks. I've used it with videos that I just make or find for free. And I post other resources there as well. So if you, here's a quick pitch then overview on perusal. So first of all, you can very easily go to perusal.com. If you scroll down, it gives you information about how the program works. It's entirely free to do it. If you click on it and you start to explore, you will get no follow-up emails. There is no pressure. The only high stakes selling of it is coming from me right now, okay? You will not get any other pressure to use perusal, which I like. You can also create an account, and if you don't like how it's set up, just make another one, okay? It's a really low barrier for entry. When you create a course within here, when I do it, I set this up outside of my regular course. I direct students to this resource. You can integrate it with your own course management system. I don't do that. I just keep it external. You're asked initially to say, well, how many students do you want to be in a particular group? Because they're going to be sharing ideas together. I teach a large class. I scale it down so they're in groups of about 10 or 15. If I had a class of 20, I might make that just a single group. And you have the option then of what do you want to post. And again, it's the way Perusal makes their money. If you post a textbook that the students are going to be using as an e-text, they get a small cut of that from the publisher. Everything else, if it's fair use, you can post for free. You can use it as a resource entirely. So I've used it in different ways. So in my honors general chemistry course, we purchased the e-text through there. That's in this library of resources along with other things that I use. And I use that then to set up assignments. So I have a pre-class reading throughout. Perusal gives you a ton of data as far as what students are using it, how long they're using it, more data than you could possibly have output for it. But in this class, I set up a daily pre-class reading throughout the semester. In my current course, we don't have a textbook linked to it. We have an e-text, but they don't purchase this through this. So a new resource they have, and this is huge for me, I make my own content, which are videos. If you've ever taught a flipped class before, and I haven't, what do? You say, well, I hope the students watched it. Or maybe you look and say, they let it run for 15 minutes. Now I know what we're doing in the space. This is huge. This is huge. So within here, I have pre-class videos that I make for every class. I take my Zoom class that I record, I post it in there after. If you miss class, well, let's discuss it within this resource. If I went too fast and you want to ask questions, let's go back and look at it in this resource. This is absolutely huge. I've also taken my lessons involving metacognition. I put it in that space too. So this is where I now have that as a resource that we can discuss. In this, my grad course, this is a huge resource for that. I keep saying huge, okay? It's a crucial resource within that, where I can take our different topics that we're gonna work through, and now asynchronously, we can have options for what we're gonna explore there. Being able to discuss things asynchronously, I hesitate to say huge again, but I'm going to. This is such a great resource for me, okay? So we might be, to sort of introduce it to you, let me share with you how I introduce it to my students. So this is what I did this last semester when I wanted to tell the students we're going to be using this thing called Perusal. So I made a quick video. I said, we're going to be using Perusal in this general chemistry course. I've prepared pre-class videos that are in this program. It's free. It's going to be outside of the course management system. It's going to be part of your grade. And I know you're going to do great on this, okay? It's going to contribute to your success in the course. So what I want you to do is go to this particular website, okay? Here's the ID that you need to log in. It's a social one. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be in a group with about 10 of your classmates, and you're going to annotate the content, which are going to be videos. I want you to share ideas with each other and with me. So when you look in the system, you're going to see a series of assignments. Notice the schedule. I have these, they're going to be set up before every class. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I would like you to do with it. This is what it now looks like within the program. So if you open up a particular assignment, you're going to find an overview as far as some of the functionality. It steps you through this very quick tutorial about how you can access content, whether it's in print or videos. So this is now Perusal, just giving a real quick overview. Students don't really need this, okay? They're fluent with the technology. I now point out, okay, so I'm going to be posting pre-class videos in this space. And within these pre-class videos, what I'm going to do is I'm going to seed them. I'm going to add my own prompts and questions along the way. So what you see on that timeline at the bottom, these are my own prompts for what I want you to think about or do along the way. This is what I've learned about seeding the text when it comes to like a chapter reading guide. I'm putting a chapter reading guide on top of my video. And this is what I want then the students to respond to. This is then, after I have a video, these are all student responses across the way for a video at different points on the timeline. So the students are able to ask questions. Initially, many of the questions are logistic ones. Should we know this? Is this something that we're supposed to do? And that question right there, that tells me it's a question. I can then respond directly back. If I include this at, then they get a text, okay? They get an update in their email. Hey, Dr. Clark responded to this, and they can send me questions. So you get sort of that special call out if you include this at symbol within this. You can go ahead and post links. So a lot of times students find resources or links. As they go through, you can have it where now this conversation is taking place. As students asking a question, you see a response, you see another response. Early on in the course, I find they struggle a little bit to be part of this conversation because the content isn't that deep. When we're now at the point when we're halfway through and we've trained each other a little bit to be able to answer and respond to questions, I'm completely blown away with what they provide substantively. Someone asks a question, a peer then gives a great response, and then someone else joins in. The content that I'm getting, that's something I'm analyzing now. This discourse that takes place in that setting, I don't know if I've seen a parallel to it. You know, because this is a space where they feel, if you set it up right, they feel like they can contribute. Imagine like your best whiteboard session, but it's asynchronous, so you can take the time and contribute. And I just find within this one, the students, they are just so generous, where initially they'll say, oh, that's a good question. You know, I'm not quite sure. And they'll give their response. They're just really generous with what they're contributing. And I'm trying to think if I've ever had to sort of shut someone down to say, hey, let's answer this way instead of that. I don't think I have, okay? So it's just so powerful, the conversations I'm seeing within that. So I point out to them, hey, try to add about 4 to 6 annotations to this. Just watch the video as it goes through. You don't have to watch to the end and double back. So what I do in my videos, I put stop signs. I say, okay, stop right here. What do you think about this? And so I add some initial prompts to say, answer this particular question at this point. They respond to other things as well, But some of those prompts are metacognitive. Hey, can you do this? What are you going to do next? Are you confident about this? I also point out that within the system, it does have a machine scoring function to it. It takes the content and it scores it. Really important. It's in the case of, if I value the user spending time to do this deeply, I want to give you credit for it. I want to give you credit. And if I give you credit, it makes such a difference if people then respond in the system. And, when I say a machine scoring, it doesn't know chemistry. So what does it do? You can try to fine tune that, but what does it do? It will look for things like, okay, how many words is it? It will look maybe at aspects of vocabulary. It looks to see, are the comments spread throughout the document? Now, having said that, it does a really good job. If someone says, I don't understand this, what are compounds? It gives them a low score. I say, try to connect to your prior knowledge. Here would be another student's response. This one gets like full credit, this one does not. And I tell the students, I'm not going to let this boss me around. I'm going to look at the scoring in there. Okay, don't feel like you need to somehow outsmart the system. Just use it as a resource. And when they do that, they do great in it. And I'm so impressed with what they're able to produce. So I encourage them, hey, just log on, give it a try. I'm eager to share ideas with them. This is now a crucial part within my course. Now, one thing that I've added is I think about the different things that I like to do. I'm a little surprised I did not make this a Venn diagram, but this is one thing that I think I'm doing in a very clever way. In my in-person one, I use a lot of PhET sims. And in my class, in a large enrollment class, I do those as a lot of instructor-led. I will be there in front of 300 people. Instructor-led means I have the sim that I'm putting up on my big screen. I'm posing questions. I'm asking people to make predictions. I have my own storyline in mind, and I'm trying to use my questioning skills to see how that we're going to interact and engage. I like PhET sims for simple exploration, but I also like them when I'm using them instructor-led, where I can try to seed particular questions and bring up particular points. So that's what I'm putting in Perusal now. Okay, I can go, so if I grab Perusal here, I'm going to log into my account. So this is going to take me to my different courses. I'm going to go, yeah, this is a general chemistry course. So these are all videos then that I have. Now, one thing I point when I say credit is important, let's just look at this example right here. So in this particular pre-class assignment, average reading time was about an hour. This is how students are being engaging with it. When I post my post-class video, nobody's adding any comments. Okay, they might engage with it, but this is the difference between it's for points or not points. Okay, I will have students say, Perusal helps me so much. I love that space. Are you going to do it if it's optional? No, they won't. They won't. And so now you could, if you do value it, add the very next question, which is, well, what if I make it extra credit? Yeah, then I'll do it. So if you want to drive it, you have to recognize that that's a feature for them. So just to grab an example, here's one where you might recognize I'm taking a PhET sim. I'll take it so I got it. So I intersperse then here, I'm going to be sharing some content. Here we see the different questions that students are having along the way. Some folks, you find people get into a particular pattern. Some are more about asking questions than others. Some are more responding. They access it at different points. This would be one, though, where I'll now take the PhET sim. I point out the same thing that I would be doing when I'm doing an instructor-led, where I might explain the different features for what we're going to be seeing. If you can develop an understanding for concentration, what do you think it's measuring? I illustrate then the different aspects for what we can now manipulate. I direct their attention to, okay, If I make changes, does it to this, is it affecting, let's say, the concentration? What's taking place if I do this? What's taking place if I add a conductivity probe? So what I find within a FET sim, if you're doing instructor-led, what you want to do is you want to lead the person to be able to make a prediction and then test it within the simulation. And so that's what I'm doing within my set here. That idea of setting it up, explaining what's going on, allowing the person to then make a prediction. I can do that all asynchronously. And then that's my starting point for what we do within the next class. So when I'm thinking about my success within this, with the space, a huge one has certainly been aspects on perusal. I want to pause within this one, and I want to hear if folks have comments, questions, if you've used a resource like this before, if you've used perusal, let's share some ideas on this, okay? So if you got comments, questions about either the first part or this, let's take a little time on this. What are your thoughts?
I put a question in the chat, Ted. I worry about, you have all these students and all these groups, and you have to now go in and look at their questions for each assignment and answer them in group sizes of 20, and you can spend your whole time doing that.
Great point. So I can answer it two ways. One is the functionality is actually easier than that. Two is I'm addicted to this, so I spend so much time instead, okay? It's like, oh, I can't believe the conversations we're here, so I can't get away from that. So the reason it's easier is students are in groups of 20, but me as a user, I see all of them at the same time. I can then filter it, and I can filter. So usually what I would do is I will filter and I will look for unanswered student questions. And that's a very small number. And I've sometimes, you can set up and decide your own policy. Eric Major, within his, he said that he says the instructor should not be in that space, because if the instructor is in that space, students do not answer each other. I don't really see that, and I can't keep myself out of the space. So sometimes my policy is, okay, I will get into the space if you direct a question to me. If you say at Ted Clark, I will join the conversation. Otherwise, I won't join the conversation. So that's how I've tried it before. But I'm not good in my own self-regulated teaching of doing that, because I want to be into the conversations, especially if there's ones that I can participate in. I definitely want to contribute to the questions that are logistic. You said we need to do this. Is that what we're going to be asked to do on a test? Do we need to actually memorize this? And you know, you do find remarkable things where I guess it shows that there are some things we have students memorize for sure. I want you to memorize Planck's constant. I want you to memorize Avogadro's number. But you show a data table with like 50 things, and they'll say, are we supposed to memorize all 50 of these? And it's remarkable. It's like, no, you don't memorize all those. And they just don't know, right? They just don't know what they're going to have to memorize. Because then I guess I'll have a table of things to naming, and I'll say, yeah, you have to memorize all these. So, I mean, it's a fair question. It's a fair question. You can also, it's very easy in a good way to have a TA say, okay, I want you to take the lead for this assignment. And if you just rotate that through, it's really easy, because I would say in some ways you want your TAs to be familiar with this as much as I am, right? Good question. Other questions?
So Ted, this is Brad Melly from St. Xavier High School. Have you used Edpuzzle at all? It has a lot, it seems like it has a lot of the same functionality as far as posting a video, recording what students have watched the video. It's actually, it seems a little bit more restrictive. Like you can prohibit skipping in the video, and you can hit, and you can have embedded quizzes. I was wondering if you had used Edpuzzle, some similarities and differences between that and Perusal.
Yeah, I know about Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle has a function that this one does not. This has a lot that Edpuzzle does not. What Edpuzzle though, you can set this, you can, sometimes teachers say, can I make it so I have a conditional question? I want to ask a question and someone has to respond to this, and then they can move ahead. They can keep moving on through that. This program is not set up that way. And I think in some ways, I like it's not set up that way. It comes back to how I am trying to position this relative to the student's metacognition. I do not want them to say, okay, I'm just going to look for the 6 comments the instructors made and respond to that and go through. I want to make it so, no, this is an entire lesson that I want you to be engaged with throughout. And as I've made this sort of like in a flipped space, this is my best job teaching this. I don't say, oh, well, let me dumb it down and put it in a pre-class video and then do something else in my space. I have found in our asynchronous world, I've got to do my best job in both spaces. I have to say, I used to do this in person. I'm going to make now a 15-minute video. I can't say, oh, and that's sort of a different philosophy. Some people say in a flipped class, make a pre-class one where you just sort of introduce the idea, you take a baby step there, and then you do more in person. I haven't done that because I don't think I can afford to do that. I think I have to say, okay, these are 15 minutes and this is as deeply as I ever cover it. But now you have an opportunity to talk about it. Let's make sure we achieve in that level. But you make a good point on the Ed Puzzle one where initially students, they do want to treat it that way. They want to treat it to say, what are the barriers that I need to get through? Let me look for the stop signs that you've provided. And so what I try to tell within that group is, you can ignore the stop signs. Perusal does not care where you're making your comments. Don't feel like you need to respond to me. If you find another part more meaningful, if you want to just respond to other people's questions, do that. So related to what you're saying though, is I know with a lot of ones, sometimes a school district, they already have a resource in place. You might already have a different system. And when I've shared this with some colleagues, that's been their main barrier. I don't want to train my students to do multiple ones. We already have this one in place, and I think Perusal is the best. I know that Perusal is actually not officially licensed by OSU, and I don't give a damn about that. I can't believe why is that. They're like, but it doesn't have the official OSU seal of approval. That tells me OSU is not getting a cut of it somehow. This though is absolutely the resource that I go to. Okay.
Dr.
Any
Clark,
other
can
questions?
you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Brad, I teach high school chemistry, but I also teach a College Credit Plus course with our high school students. And for our first semester this year, I was using Perusal for textbook reading assignments. And my students were in person. And so what I found that I didn't build well into the class was the dialogue online because we were meeting face to face. And so a lot of those discussions we were having in the classroom. I was really interested in the data that it would give me about the number of minutes that students were spending on their assignments outside of class. And I gave them some nice data graphing their test scores versus their out of class commitment. And there was a really nice correlation there, but pretty small sample size. I only have 24 students. But then second semester, I was using Edpuzzle more because of how it integrates with Google Classroom. That's just pretty seamless just to get the videos in there. But what the Edpuzzle doesn't have is the feature for students to dialogue with each other. Like I can post a question and I can see their answers, but they don't get to interact with each other there. So I really am looking forward to next fall, kind of starting over with Perusal, but really marketing that dialogue between students in that place. Because I feel like I just didn't sell that well to them. It was just one student who would always ask questions to me, and there was never anything back and forth between the two.
On Krista's point there, the selling of it, when I tell colleagues how I'm excited about Perusal, when they give it a try, many times they do not find success with it. And the key thing is how you position it within your course. I had, the very first time I used it, I had students, and this was with the textbook, they would say, I don't learn this way. I don't know if I believe them. Okay, I think if they're engaging with it, they do learn this way. But what they were saying to me, I felt was, okay, I'm doing this in Perusal, I'm contributing this way, and it's not helping me on the test. And so it made me think, okay, I got to reposition this within my course. So I tell them now, I want you to view this as a take-home test that you are going to be able to contribute to the entire semester, because I value so much you being able to take scientific information, connect it to prior knowledge, ask good questions, answer good questions, think about it in new ways. I value that so much more than you can answer a multiple choice question. So you know what? This is the most authentic task I have. I'm going to value this throughout, and you are going to do well on this. So in the course where I have complete control, I change how I value this. This is as much as a test. This is a take-home test throughout. And I really value achievement within that. And that turns it now for the people that are saying, I am going to do things that lead to success in the course. I am showing I value this, and this leads to success in my course. And I'm going to segue within the last one, because we had word mention of a College Credit Plus. That's my last thing I want to pitch here. So we've got a couple veterans of this, couple participants. So when I saw who was attending today's session, I got a little bit more nervous, because I was going to be talking about this program, and I actually have victims of the program here. So what we've what I've set up is we've got a new program with this name, which is a imposing name, Advanced Chemistry Knowledge for Educators. I've had the joy here of being able to set up and design some online grad courses that are totaling 18 credit hours for folks that need 18 credit hours in the discipline in order to teach College Credit Plus courses. So what I'm doing is I'm taking courses and I'm dividing up my own general chemistry course. And we're looking at the ideas that are found there in a deeper way. So I've got ones that we're just dividing it up, stepping through, and I've really taken things that I've learned for what makes for successful professional development from these modeling workshops, and I'm trying to take those insights and put them into this class. So as I think about this, it has a modular format. I've said it has to have meaning to the participants. And in order to make it flexible, we need things that would be self-paced. So what I've done is I've taken my course, and we just stepped through, and each of those are now becoming different modules. And I'm thinking within those, okay, what are ideas that we can look at more deeply across the way? In a given general chemistry course, there's so many topics that there's more substantive things that we can talk about. So that's what I'm trying to include within this particular course, recognizing that the teachers bring together certain pedagogical knowledge, and I'm trying to enrich it now with their content knowledge. I did not anticipate, but you know what, people? Another Venn diagram, because I think that this overlap here, this is so important. How can we bring together the pedagogical insights that folks have with a deeper content understanding? And I'm recognizing that, as participants within this, as professionals, the overlap is not always the same for every topic. There are some topics within my course that I do spend more time trying to think about teaching them, compared to I just want to know the ideas more deeply. There are so many things in my general chemistry class that I know more deeply that never show up in my instruction. But you know what? I feel so assured that when the student does ask a question and they say, well, now in the Schrodinger equation, why do we square it? I want to know the answer. Okay. I feel so bad if it's when you see someone says, oh, that's covered in an advanced class, you'll have to wait. To me, that is just me saying, I don't know the right answer. And I can cover my ass by saying that, but I want to know the right answer. Okay. So what I've set up within this course is to try to have instructional resources that can guide people to say, well, where do they fall? Are they more about pedagogical or more about content knowledge for a given topic? To try to use some pre-assessments within there to direct them to see, well, where exactly does your knowledge initially stand? And the kind of resources for instructional, I want as much as I can. I mentioned how the course structure is important. If I can share my course structure, I want to do so. If it's chapter reading guides, if it's different videos, if I use, if it's my lecture slides, I want to share that with folks so they can then adopt it for their local use. look at things of how it is presented in the literature for education, and then deeper dive for the content. And the kinds of assignments, I want the participants to tell me about these, construct lesson plans, and reflect on this. Now, as I look at these different ones as far as resources, what I've learned is when modeling teachers participate in this, they're not very good students. They're not very good students because if I say, look, I've given you 20 resources, try to pick the ones that you think might be interesting. A modeling teacher does not stop. They look at all 20. They'll say, no, here's my chance. I want to look at all of these. So that's what I've learned is modeling teachers are poor participants if I say, hey, only choose what you're going to find meaningful because they want to look at everything. Now, as a word of warning for the folks that we have, a couple people here that took this first course and are taking subsequent ones, I am not helping you. I've gone just the opposite way. Instead of saying, okay, I'm going to streamline and only have the most important 3 things to look at for this topic, I have given you 30. I have made it impossible to look at everything. Okay, so that's how I'm trying to outsmart the modeling teacher. We shall see. Okay. Within this one, though, if you want more information, if you think you know someone that might be interested, here's my name.number. Shoot me a message. I can share a syllabus. I can let folks know how the course runs. Some of the best advertising I have for this comes from folks like you all. I want to give the floor a little bit, though, because we have a couple participants from this. Anything you want to share about your initial experience?
Yeah, I would say that, so I took the first course last summer. I already had the hour requirement to be certified, but I'm a biology major. I said certified is not the right word, given permission to teach a college credit plus class. But I just felt really lacking in my confidence of chemistry. I've taught AP chemistry for a few years, maybe 7 years with that. And I still just, I never took chemistry beyond biochem as an undergrad. And that was a long time ago. And so these courses really helped me just gain that confidence and the resources to turn to, just different textbooks that I didn't know were out there, lots of different articles. I found the reading guides immensely helpful in my own lessons. The lecture slides, I've used those, modified them, make my own videos with those lecture slides. It just really changed my course, but it just changed my confidence, just really made me feel like I know what I'm doing. And even if I don't know what I'm doing, but it just made me feel really very directed in my approach. I can't wait to take the next class. And I also learned a lot about electrons.
Sort of a thought on this, as I try to think about the courses like this in physics instruction, when I oftentimes as a chemical education researcher, I find that a lot of the different studies that one might do have already been done in physics for the physics students. Physics education research is in front of chemical education research. And when I talk to colleagues like that, many times they point out that, okay, our curriculum in physics instruction is far more set than it is in chemistry. The content that we are teaching, excuse my ignorance, okay, slopes and inclined planes and different friction and stuff. Okay, we already know that is our content. And in chemistry, there's more variability as far as what counts as current information that you might include, different things like that. So therefore, we've had the luxury of beginning to focus more on aspects of the instruction versus deciding what's in the curriculum in some ways. And so I'm just curious, since I got physics people here, I'm curious, do you think that physics and what you teach, does it have the same need for advanced knowledge of those topics? In a way, when I teach general chemistry, all the topics that I teach are so cursory. Oh, this is what J.J. Thomson did. Now I can talk for 3 days about that. But in my class, I just mentioned all of those have so much more, and that's a physics topic, right? But that shows up in my chemistry class. So many, to me, of the great physics topics, I get to teach. I get to teach about Bohr. I get to teach about De Broglie. I get to teach about Rutherford. I get to teach about all of these. And so I'm just curious, if you're a physics teacher, I'm sure there's some, when you start to do circuits or different things. But what is your view? Do you feel like there are a lot of topics that would include a deeper dive for content that would be beneficial or not?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Ted, I don't think we ever really get to teach the cool part of physics. I teach AP Physics 1 and I teach AP Chem, so I kind of see both sides of it. And in the interest of, kind of the less is more thing and giving them richer experiences with material, in AP Physics 1, they just do mechanics. Like they do like the ditch digging in physics, and students can see it and all that. But once it gets to what I think is the coolest part, like the thermodynamics and the quantum mechanics, the things the students are actually interested in, by the way, like the questions I get are very rarely, wow, can you explain more about like angular momentum or inclined planes? What they really want to know is, can we talk about black holes? Can we talk about, this whole quantum mechanical thing? Those are their questions that would ask me as a teacher to go beyond what would be in the traditional high school curriculum. And chemistry, for what's worth, in AP chemistry, they've like cut out quantum numbers, they've cut out the Rydberg equation. They cut out what I think, I went through as a physical chemist. Like that's the stuff I love. Once things start reacting, it's like, I'll do it because it's a chemistry class, but I would much rather do the physical chemistry. But they've kind of cut that out. And so I don't get as many questions about that cool stuff in chemistry as I do the cool stuff in physics that isn't part of the curriculum. So yeah, I would say absolutely there would be a needed interest in stuff that isn't normally taught in a physics course.
Well, I would say teaching high school physics, and I teach honors and AP1 and APC. It's the making the connection to what you see in everyday life. And what I found when I first started teaching physics, even though I have a physics degree and everything else, I was so poor at my connection to real life. Like I can do the problems they give me in a textbook, but looking at football, and talking about the physics of football intelligently, not just the surface level. It took me a long time to get to make physics relatable. And I mean, when I teach my course, I focus on driving your car because all the high school students I teach all drive. And I say, everything I'm going to talk about, we can come up with an example when you're driving your car. And I think it makes a big difference for it being relatable to them.
As someone who has been at many modeling workshops, and I spend time walking into what the physics people are doing, so that's my insight within there. I find that so much of that your intro physics is about is taking the real life and saying, but that's not the model we're working from. When you push things, they eventually stop. But what if you push things and we're going to have a model where that doesn't stop? What does it mean to conceptually take your real world and say, we're going to get insights by changing all of your assumptions on that? That's going to be the model that we construct. So in some ways, to me, it's not about knowing more deeply about this particular topic. It's more about that whole great conceptual space of we need to think about it differently here. That's your cohesive storyline that shows up again and again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I tell them too, you've been formulating physics concepts and you sat in your high chair and dropped your spoon off the side. And so you have all these ideas about how the world works. But it's because you don't know about these invisible forces you can't see in the rest. You don't really understand how the world works, but you think you do, and how to break those concepts like heavy things fall faster, so you end up doing a simple demonstration like taking a sheet of paper and dropping it and then wadding the paper up and dropping it next to my car keys each time. And it's like, it wasn't the mass that was different, right? So it's really, it's taken me a long time to come up with those break the way you think the world actually works examples that students can connect to and remember.
Yeah, and my students are at the point now, at this point in the year, I ask them a question. They say, well, here's what we think is going to happen, but we know it's wrong because it's what we think is going to happen. And so it's like, wow, that's so defeatist. So every now and then I like to throw something in where, what happens, what they expect actually is what happens, just to throw them off.
So I think,
Oh, go ahead. I was just trying to see if there's anything in the chat that we had hanging out.
yeah,
Well,
I was actually going to say from a fair bit earlier back in the chat, someone had asked if you had a link to your metacognition lessons.
I can I can now, because I always used to do them in person, but now I can share my I should be able to share my my actual video link now. I should actually set up a shared perusal course so we can all just be in that space and
I was just going to ask that. I saw the code that popped up earlier in the from your Gen Chem class. Are we able to sign in for that class?
Yeah, you would be able to. Yeah, I also saw a previous.
Don't put me in a group. I don't want to talk to people.
I do think that something like perusal would be great for a book club, a professional book club of like-minded people. Unbelievable, right? We can asynchronously share our ideas. Yeah.
If I could get you to email me that link, and also if you happen to be willing to share your slides, and we'd be happy to add all that information to the meeting program so folks can access those links.
Yep, I'll try to compile stuff and I'll do so. I'm going
Awesome.
to
Thank
stop
you.
our